Hello there. You're watching World News program coming to you live here from Algiers on All 24 News with me, Karim Fazakari. And these are today's headlines. U.S. Secretary of State is on an official visit to Algeria to hold meeting with Algerian President Abdelmadjid Tebboune and Foreign Minister Ramtal Amamra. During Istanbul talks, Moscow said it would drastically reduce military activity near the Ukrainian cities of Kiev and Chernihiv. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky stated that he sees positive signs in Istanbul peace talks between Ukraine and Russia. President Joe Biden approved legislation making lynching a federal hate crime. And a gunman has killed at least 5 people on ultra-Orthodox suburb of the Zionist city Tel Aviv before being shot dead. Welcome again. Those were today's top stories. Today, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken is visiting Algeria to hold a meeting with Algerian President Abdelmadjid Tebboune and Foreign Minister Ramtal Amamra to discuss regional security and stability. The two parties will also discuss other areas of common interest, including trade, cooperation, promotion of human rights and fundamental freedoms. And also, U.S. Secretary will officially inaugurate his country's pavilion as the guest of honor of the Algeria International Trade Fair, the largest trade fair of its kind in Africa. He will also meet with representatives of American businesses in Algeria to discuss deepening economic relations and enhancing trade and investment between the United States and Algeria. In the 35th day of the Russian military operation in Ukraine, Russia's defense ministry said it would drastically reduce military activity on Kiev and Chernihiv following talks in Istanbul. Ukraine accuses Russia of intensifying attacks on Chernihiv despite a Russian promise to scale back, according to the northern region's governor. Ukraine's military states that Russian move is intended to mislead its forces. Meanwhile, Ukrainian president says Kiev will not reduce its defensive efforts. UK military intelligence says Russia is still a significant threat to Kiev. Talks between Russian and Ukrainian delegations were hosted in the Turkish city of Istanbul. Moscow said it would drastically reduce military activity near the Ukrainian cities of Kiev and Chernihiv, but the US and other Western leaders were skeptical, saying they would judge Russia by its actions and not its words. Nabil Khazini has this report.
A glimmer of hope for a possible truce in the conflict between Russia and Ukraine, after talks hosted in a Turkish palace in Istanbul, which are seen by Ankara's foreign minister as the most significant since the beginning of the crisis.
The most significant progress since the start of the talks was made today.
The first signs of progress towards negotiating peace started after Russia has promised to scale down its military operations near the Ukrainian capital, Kiev.
After today's substantial conversation, we agreed and suggest solution according to which the meeting of the heads of the state is possible. It is possible to discuss various political nuances and details. Thus, in case of quick work on the agreement, the opportunity to conclude peace will become much closer.
While Ukraine proposed adopting neutral status, something Russia has constantly asked for, and Kiev wants exchanging military neutrality for security guarantees.
Of course, the agreement on security guarantees can only be signed after the ceasefire and the withdrawal of all Russian troops at the positions compromised upon, those as of 23rd February 2022.
But early today, the governor of Chernihiv, some 145 kilometers from Kiev, posted an online video saying Russia has shelled the city last night, while in Kiev, a fire broke out after a strike in a warehouse in the Brovary district.
In the same context, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky stated that he sees positive signs in Istanbul peace talks between Ukraine and Russia. However, he promises that Kiev will not reduce its defense efforts. Let's have a listen.
We can say that the signs we are hearing from negotiations are positive, but these signs do not cover Russian shell explosions. That is why we are not going to calm down. We are not going to decrease our defense efforts, both in the north of our state and in all regions of Ukraine where Russian troops have temporarily entered. We must not lose our vigilance. The situation has not become easier. The scale of the challenges has not diminished. The Russian military still has significant potential to continue attacks against our state.
Just hours after Russia said it would withdraw some troops from around Kiev, air raid sirens sounded in the Ukrainian capital Kiev in the early hours of Wednesday. This comes while Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky says he's skeptical of Russia's pledge to scale back its military forces. After Moscow said it would reduce radically its military activity around the city, the Pentagon spokesman John Kirby says Russian troops pulling out of Ukraine's capital are far from representing the majority of what they deployed against Kiev.
I have a number estimate, but it's certainly not a significant chunk of the multiple battalion tactical groups that Russia has arrayed against Kyiv. So we can confirm that we've seen a small number start to reposition, but I'd really be reticent to get into an exact number or try to put a unit on it. It's not anywhere near a majority of what they have arrayed against Kyiv. It does not mean that the threat to Kyiv is over. Russia has failed in its objective of capturing Kyiv. It's failed in its objective of subjugating Ukraine, but they can still inflict massive brutality on the country, including on Kyiv. We see that even today in continued airstrikes against the capital city.
And during a press conference, Kate Bedingfield, the White House communications director, said that the Biden administration sees Russia's troops moving away from Kyiv as a redeployment rather than an absolute withdrawal. The United States will watch and see if Russia's actions match its words regarding its troops in Ukraine. This statement comes after Russia said it would reduce fighting around the Ukrainian cities of Kiev and Chernihiv following discussions with Ukraine on Tuesday.
Hi, everyone. But I think we should be clear-eyed about the reality of what's happening on the ground, and no one should be fooled by Russia's announcements. We believe any movement of forces from around Kyiv is a redeployment and not a withdrawal, and the world should be prepared for a major offensive against other areas of Ukraine. The president has been very clear that, we will respond with severe consequences, as we have responded with severe consequences to every action Russia has taken up until this point.
Residential parts of Ukraine's eastern city of Lysychansk were shelled by heavy artillery on Wednesday morning, according to Serhiy Gadey, the regional governor of Luhansk earlier. Gadey said that in Lysychansk, Ukrainian emergency workers found the body of one person under the rubble, rescuing 5 people and evacuating 8 more to safety. 2 German states have outlawed public displays of letter Z, which has become synonymous with support for Russia's war in Ukraine. Authorities in Bavaria and Lower Saxony said over the weekend that anyone who displays the symbol at public demonstrations or paints it on cars or buildings could face a fine of up to 3 years in jail. Osama Ayadi in this report.
Those who exhibit the Z sign in favor of Russia's military operation in Ukraine will face legal consequences in Germany, according to authorities. Z sign usage to glorify what Germany called Russian war crimes will be handled by Berlin's Interior Minister Nancy Faeser, who made the announcement Monday.
The letter Z as such is of course not forbidden, but its use in individual cases constitute an endorsement of the Russian war of aggression.
Officials in Berlin, Bavaria, Saxony and Lower Saxony have already indicated they would punish anybody who displays the sign in their states. It has been claimed that other German states, such as Saxony and Halt, have also said they would prosecute anybody who used the sign in their areas.
The Russian war of aggression on Ukraine is a criminal act, and whoever publicly approves this war of aggression can also make himself liable to prosecution.
The letter Z, which is part of the Latin alphabet but not the Cyrillic one used in Russian, first appeared on tanks and other military vehicles massing near Russia's border with Ukraine, possibly as a way to distinguish them from Ukrainian forces. Once the invasion began, Z was hard to miss. The letter was featured across social media and was plastered on billboards and stickers throughout Russia. Even outside of the country, the symbol has appeared on clothing. The origins of the sign may be mysterious.
In his first visit since the conflict in Ukraine began, the Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov meets his Chinese counterpart Wang Yi for a two-day visit. Sergei Lavrov will attend a series of meetings hosted by China devoted to Afghanistan. Diplomats from the United States and the Taliban-led country's neighbors are also expected to attend. During a meeting of the UN Security Council devoted to the humanitarian situation in Ukraine, Russia was accused of having caused a world food crisis. World Food Organization warned of an escalation of the crisis.
Vladimir Putin started this war. He created this global food crisis. And he is the one who can stop it. We really hope that President Putin will commit seriously to the peace talks underway. But we are focused on what Russian forces do, not what Russia says, not what Putin says.
So now we're talking about a catastrophe on top of a catastrophe, because Ukraine, from the breadbasket of the world now to bread lines, we never would have dreamed anything like this would be possible. And it's not just decimating dynamically Ukraine in the region, but it will have global context impact beyond anything we've seen since World War II. Inside Ukraine, we've reached right now about 1 million people. Over the next 4 weeks, we will reach 2.5 million people. And by the end of May, we will have reached 4 million people. And then by the end of June, we hope to be reaching about 6 million people on any given day, week, or month, so to speak.
The global economy as a whole is witnessing the effects of slowing growth and accelerating inflation after the Russian military operation in Ukraine. Rising commodity prices such as food and energy have further increased inflation, worsening the economic situation after a devastated one due to COVID-19 pandemic. Miriam Zian has the full story.
The Russian-Ukrainian crisis led to repercussions across the globe, but the most affected countries are those who already live in wars. Exacerbated food difficulties are spoiling preparations for the holy month of Ramadan in parts of Africa and the Middle East, particularly in the Palestinian territories.
All the wars that occur in the world affect the Gaza Strip in particular, because the Gaza Strip lives on the aid that comes from European countries and donor countries. But today, these European countries have concentrated all their help to Ukraine and displaced people there. And it affected us. Flour and oil prices went up, and everything went up in price. All this affects the citizen.
There is a great suffering because people have no money, no jobs, and prices reach record heights.
The repercussions of the Russian-Ukrainian crisis and the accompanying rise in prices have affected citizens who suffer from difficult living conditions. The unemployment rate is at 49%, and the poverty line has exceeded 50%, and 80% of citizens in the Gaza Strip are dependent on humanitarian aid, which puts citizens under additional burdens to meet the needs of Ramadan this year.
African and Middle East countries are one of the most affected ones economically. And because of the Ukrainian crisis, Palestinians, among others, are left out and all attention is shifted to Ukraine.
President Joe Biden of the United States has approved legislation making lynching a federal hate crime. After more than a century and 200 failed attempts by U.S. politicians to establish anti-lynching legislation, the law was finally passed. Islam Said has this report.
US President Joe Biden signed a bill on Tuesday that makes lynching a federal crime, which have become symbols of the racist past of the United States. The legislation provides for up to 30 years in prison for this crime.
I just signed into law the Emmett Till Anti-Lynching Act, making lynching a federal hate crime for the first time in American history.
It is named after Emmett Till, a black teenager tortured and killed in 1955 in the southern state of Mississippi, whose name marked the struggle of civil rights. Alongside Biden at the signing at the White House were Vice President Kamala Harris, the first black woman to hold this position in the United States, and Mitchell Dusser, descendant of black journalist and activist Etta B. Wells. Ms. Harris said the acts of terror based on race still occur in the United States. The bill was passed by American parliamentarians in early March after more than a century of failed attempts.
Another episode of devastating flash flooding has struck Australia's eastern coast. After 2 days of torrential rain, the famous seaside resort of Byron Bay in New South Wales state is underwater, forcing store owners to close on Wednesday. After getting 400 millimeters of rain in a 24-hour period in the northeastern region of the state, floodwaters are once again pouring through the streets of Lismore, triggering a breach of the town's levees.
If you live on and near any rivers, creeks and streams, please stay up to date with the latest forecast and warnings and listen to all advice from emergency services, because as we saw last night, these coastal troughs and small-scale low-pressure systems are always rapidly evolving and quickly changing weather systems. Sometimes they fall on the coast, sometimes they fall off the coast. Unfortunately, this time it formed right on the coast rapidly overnight, causing intense and torrential rainfall that caused the widespread flooding that we saw through our communities.
The messaging has also been through the night and over the last few days to stay aware of your surroundings and to be across what is coming. So we talked yesterday afternoon about the potential for levee overtop. We talked again during the night about potential for levee overtop. Emergency text messages were also issued during the night to the community, and the warnings were also issued during the night.
A gunman has killed at least 5 people in an ultra-Orthodox suburb of the Zionist city of Tel Aviv, before being shot dead, marking the third such attack within a week. The attack started in the ultra-Orthodox city of Bnei Brak, just east of Tel Aviv, before continuing on and ending near the entrance to Ramat Gan. Saudi state news agency SPA made a statement from the coalition's official spokesman saying the coalition will halt its ongoing military offensive in Yemen from March 30th in order for negotiations between Yemen parties to succeed. The truce would help create a positive atmosphere during the holy month of Ramadan. The Houthi rebels dismissed the offer over the continuing closure of Sanaa's airport and the curbs on the country's ports. More than 7 people were murdered and dozens went missing after a suspected armed group attacked a train headed to Kaduna from the capital Abuja on Monday evening. This came right after armed men attacked an airport in the city. Some people have chosen to use train after many kidnappings by bandits on Nigerian highways, especially in the northwest of the country.
This is dastardly acts, but I'd like to assure you that those behind it will not go unpunished. Currently, the men are on their chairs, and they will certainly pay the price.
And we'll be making calls back and front, you know. And, well, the information reaching me right now that there's every possibility that some people were kidnapped and all that, yeah. And some people were shot.
According to UN officials, 8 UN peacekeepers were killed on Tuesday when a Puma helicopter crashed in the area of Tashanju, the scene of recent clashes between the M23 rebel group and Congolese soldiers. 6 Pakistanis, a Russian and a Serb were on a reconnaissance mission and their bodies retrieved during a search and rescue operation launched by MONUSCO. German Health Minister Karl Lauterbach believes that vaccines suitable for the Omicron variant would not be available in the EU until the autumn, arguing for the administration of a new booster for the over 60s.
I'm expecting the suitable vaccines for later, because from what I know, the development will be delayed, so I don't expect the new vaccines to be available until the fall. September could be a target month, and that's why it is very important that we do not wait for the fourth vaccination until the arrival of these new adapted vaccines.
Ghana Parliament votes on the creation of a tax on electronic transactions, very contested, and which had triggered a social mobilization, but ardently defended by the government, which tries to fill a large public deficit. The law, called a levy, imposes a 1.5% tax on electronic transactions, including mobile money payments, widely used in the country. To sports news, Tuesday's matches resulted in 7 other teams qualifying for the 2022 FIFA World Cup join the European qualifiers. FIFA also announced the postponement of the Scotland-Ukraine match. And before we wrap up our news, here is a reminder of our today's top stories. U.S. Secretary of State is in an official visit to Algeria to hold a meeting with the Algerian President Abdelmajid Tebboune and Foreign Minister Mtala Mamra. During Istanbul talks, Moscow said it would drastically reduce military activity near the Ukrainian cities of Kiev and Chernihiv. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky stated that he sees positive signs in Istanbul peace talks between Ukraine and Russia. President Joe Biden approved legislation making lynching a federal hate crime. And finally, a gunman has killed at least 5 people in an ultra-Orthodox suburb of the Zionist city, Tel Aviv, before being shot dead. Well, that's it for our news. Thank you for keeping it here on All 24 News with me, Karim Fazakari. Bye for now.